All right, there's a few news articles that caught my attention. This one here, we were just talking about on Pulse Security Podcast. It's pretty impressive. This is academic research. They wanted to see what infrared remote controls leak out. So they put an extra device in a house that can read the infrared, and they found out that infrared remote controls are extremely insecure. They don't encrypt the data at all, and anything you put in there can be picked up by another device in your home, any rogue device, and in principle, we were discussing it, I don't think the paper did this, but in principle you could do it from outside your house because infrared should go through the windows to some extent. And what they point out is anything you put into your remote control, they can pick it up and they can extract the characters, and any data you enter with the on-screen keyboard, going left, right, up, down, they can deduce the keys so they can get passwords to your cloud accounts and whatever else you enter, PIN codes, even credit card numbers. Roku has a spot where you enter a credit card number that way. And so that's an interesting fact. And there's IR is spraying your data all over the place, and it's not encrypted, and in principle could be eavesdropped on. I'm not aware of any actual attacks using this yet, but it's a realistic vulnerability. And here's one that's been patched. If you go into somebody's Google Cloud account and you create a process and then you delete the account, you can create a ghost process that is still connected to a previous account, and that is hidden, and there's a way to trick it. And the point is, you could create things like cryptocurrency miners running on somebody else's Google account, and there was no way to detect it. There was no way to get rid of it without deleting your Google account, but they found it and fixed it. I see a question, is class time or office hours? Well, I do the news before class starts. So if you have questions, wait till after this. It'll be about 10 minutes. And then I'll have a gap before I start doing the demos when I can answer questions. All right, this is something people may not appreciate. The nutritional supplements like vitamins and stuff and herbal supplements are not audited by the U.S. government at all. They're not regulated and they're not inspected. But a study did go and examine them, and they found out that if you get sleep aid gummies, which apparently are popular to give to children with melatonin in them, they can have enormously wrong doses of melatonin, off by like 3 times what it should be. And that may actually have toxic effects and such. So it's a thing to be aware of. These nutritional supplements often do not contain what they're supposed to contain, and they often do not contain the dosage they claim to contain. And the government does not prevent that. So BART, our local light rail, I used to ride it all the time, and they're now changing it because, as many people have been talking about ever since the pandemic, downtown San Francisco is pretty much deserted. There used to be a lot of traffic. San Francisco's population used to go up, I think, by 2 million every day. There are only 750,000 full-time residents, and 2 million people would commute downtown every day and then leave every night. And now many fewer people do that because most people work remotely. So the restaurants downtown and the businesses and everything are all suffering from lack of traffic. And BART the trains are not full anymore. They used to be absolutely packed full. So they're going to have less service in the daytime and more service at night and weekends to adapt to that. So it sounds like a good positive development. The one thing I hope they deal with is the homeless people that just live on the trains. That's the reason I'm more reluctant to ride them than I used to be. There are scary homeless people that just live on the trains constantly, and it would be nice if they would do something about that. So Peter Thiel is a billionaire that contributes a lot to Republican campaigns, and he's now openly gay. He tried to conceal that, and he destroyed a magazine that leaked out the secret that he was gay, but now he's openly gay. And the point is, he's doing something which I'm really glad to see, and it's also what I hear on the All In podcast, which is people related to Peter Thiel and Elon Musk. They're all part of the PayPal mafia, billionaires that work together on PayPal, and they're getting fed up with the Republican Party, which it's about time. And they say the fact that the Republican Party is now focusing on culture war nonsense like picking on transgender people and gay people and fighting with Walt Disney World is all garbage. The reason these billionaires supported Republicans is for fiscal policy. where they would hopefully do things like balance the budget and limit government spending and stuff like that. That's what they care about. And they've noticed what a lot of people have noticed, that the Republican Party doesn't care about fiscal issues anymore. All they care about is this culture war nonsense. So he stopped all contributing to the Republican Party until they return back to fiscal discipline, if indeed they do. And they're currently going through this brinksmanship about the debt ceiling, where they'll make at least some pretense to do that, but not in any effective way. So anyway, that's probably a positive development. I certainly don't want to see Trump get back in. It's obvious that Trump will be the nominee, and I hope everybody supporting the Republicans knocks it off, because Trump is no good, and we have to. There's not we're supporting the Republican Party until they stop being so insane. So here's an article from a few years ago, but it's interesting. They did a study. I've heard these results before, but I haven't seen a study. There was an official study, a scientific study, to check to see what music piracy and movie piracy does to the sales of music and movies. And what they found is it does not harm sales, as far as they can measure it. This is what the pirates have always said. They said, this just promotes your music, gets more copies of it out there, and more people are likely to buy it. And they concluded here that they couldn't find any harm done by music piracy, which is probably true. When I was a kid, it was very common that you just play music on the radio for free, and that was just promoted it. The fact that you could hear it for free didn't mean that you didn't go buy it if you wanted it. So this is probably a very good idea. The way it currently works on laptop devices is you for example, a MacBook. You go into the settings and you tell it whether each app is allowed to access the microphone and the camera or not. And that's also the way you do it on phones. But Chrome OS has changed this now to a much better way. They've added a single toggle switch so you can change whether the mic or camera is on, regardless of which app is running, which is much better. I know my camera at home just has a physical block. You can close the lid on the camera so you know that it won't get a picture, and you need something like that. There ought to just be a way to turn it off and know that it's off regardless of which process is running. That would be a whole lot safer. So I think everybody should follow suit here. So this is a cute trick. There is something called an iPhone security key that Apple introduced in 2020, so you can turn on a recovery key, and then you're going to need to put in a 28-digit code when you reset your Apple ID password. Now, this might seem like a way to protect you, but the problem is there's a new attack, or an attack that is becoming more common now. And the point of this is to stop SIM swapping attacks, where people call up the customer service line and try to convince them that you've lost your phone. But it opens to a different attack, where first they watch your victim type in their passcode, then you steal the phone. Then they go into your account and change the passcode so you can't get in to change it. And now they have access to your account for longer to make purchases and exploit it. So that's the problem with these security features. They can be turned against you to lock out the legitimate user. Reminds me of an old attack in the days of Yahoo email and chat. You could lock anybody out of their Yahoo account because all you had to do was put in the wrong password some number of times, like 10 times, and then the account would be locked. And you could just do this to anybody at any time. There's a Mac security audit tool called Mergen, which sounds interesting. It just checks to see if various security features of your Mac are running correctly and turned on. So it might be a good thing to try. Seems to me like it'd be a good thing perhaps for home users, and probably even more for companies that have Macs that would like to make sure that the Macs are up to a certain level of security. This is something I hadn't heard of, and I was surprised. I didn't know this. Mandiant developed a tool to make a form of a hash. And if you want to detect malware, you could just do like an MD5 hash of the malware file, but the problem is any change would change the MD5 hash. So that would only detect that specific file. What's better is to go through and get a list of all the header information, all the libraries they import, and all the specific functions they import, and make a hash of that. And then, even if they recompile it or change some things, it will still match. And that's a thing called imp hash, which Mandiant has developed tools to do this, and they use it to identify malware, and it didn't exist for Linux, so this guy wrote a version of it for Linux. So this does sound like a very good way to fingerprint binaries. And it reminds me of fuzzy hashing, which is what's used to detect child pornography now. Instead of just doing a hash of the image, you do something called a fuzzy hash, where you break the image down into segments and hash the segments in particular, so even modifications of the image will still match portions of this. A similar thing. This is a new side channel attack on Intel CPUs. The existing famous attack of Spectre and Meltdown that happened years ago attacked speculative execution, so that it is a feature built in all processors and has been for more than a decade to try to make them faster, and it turned out to have a fundamental security flaw which could not be patched, and all the processors we're currently using are vulnerable to it, although they have mitigations in the support code around the processor to limit some of the attacks. And here's a new one where the eFlags register, which is the register that records things like whether the last operation produced a 0 or not, the eFlags register can be used to leak out information from privileged parts of memory. So they were able to achieve 100% success leaking confidential data out of the Intel Core i7 and some success with the Intel Core i9. So it is a thing to know. There's a side channel that can leak out information that should not be visible, very much like Spectre and Meltdown. And so since you can't patch the hardware, the only mitigation is to detect the specific techniques that are being used and block them at some higher level, like antivirus. Is the fuzzy hash technology often being used in antivirus software? I am not aware of it being used there, Shu, but I'd be very interested to learn more about it and see what good it is. It's news to me. Anyway, that's all the news.